Hello everyone, I'm Abasoon and welcome to my course on cloud compliance. And today we are looking into the topic of information governance. That here in this session we will be seeing as information is same as a data, so you can talk, and it is similar to what we are having as a data governance. So this content I'm preparing, which is on the basis of CSA and NIST. So let's look into it. So the primary goal of the information security is to provide the fundamental data that powers our system and applications. As company transition to cloud computing, the method for securing data are challenged by cloud-based architectures. Elasticity, multi-tenancy, new physical and logical architecture, and abstracted controls require new data security strategy. In many cases, cloud deployments user even transfer data to external or even public environment in ways that would have been unthinkable only a few years ago. There are numerous aspects of having data stored in the cloud that have an impact on information and data governance requirements. So into the multi-tenancy. Multi-tenancy presents complicated security implications. When data is stored in public domain, it's stored on shared infrastructure with others, untrusted tenants. Even in a private cloud environment, it is stored and managed on infrastructure that's shared across different business units, which likely have different governance needs. Second is shared security responsibility with with greater sharing of environment, greater sharing of security responsibility. Data is now more like to be owned and managed by different teams or even organization. So it is important to recognize the difference between data custodian and data ownership. So now what is data ownership? As the name says, is about who owns the data. That's not always perfectly clear. If a customer provides you data, you might own it, or they might still legally own it. Depends on law, contract, and policies. If you host your data on a public cloud provider, you should own it, but that might again depend on the contract. Next is custodian. Custodianship is referred to who is managing the data. If a customer gives you their personal information and you don't have a right to own it, you are merely the custodian. This means you can only use it in approved way. If you use the public cloud provider, they likely become the custodian of a data, although you likely have uh, custodian responsibility depending on what controls you implement and manage. So, by hosting customer data on cloud, we are introducing a third party into the uh, governance model, the cloud provider. Judicial boundaries and data sovereignty. Since cloud, by definition, enabled broad networks access, it increases the opportunity to host data in more location and reduce the friction in migrating data. Some providers may not be transparent about the public location of the data, while in other cases additional control may need to be strict this. The next is compliance, regulation, and privacy policy. All of these may be impacted by cloud due to combination of third party provider, judicial changes. Example, your customer agreement may not allow you to share use data on a cloud provider. Next is destruction and removal of data. We always talk about how to create the data, how to manage the data, but when it comes to the destruction and removal of data, generally we don't pay so much attention on that. This ties in a technical capability of a cloud platform. Can you ensure the destruction and removal of a data in accordance with the policy? Now, if we talk about the data information and governance, it means ensuring that the use of data and information compliance with organization policy, standard, strategy. This include regulatory, contractual, and business requirement and objective. We will not cover all the data governance. We only focus on the data governance corresponding to our cloud. The first is information classification. This is frequently ties to the compliance and affect the cloud destination and handling requirement. Not everyone industry has a data classification program. So here we talking about to classify the data like which is critical, which is confidential, which is sensitive, which is public, should be publicly available. Those type of classification should be done. Information management policy, this ties to the classification. The cloud needs to add it if you have it. So if you're having a classification, let's share the public data can be available with anybody. But if it is you are saying it's a confidential data, it should not be even available with all the employees of an organization. For the certain, you can say C-suite employees should be having the access of that. Third is the location and judicial policy. So they have a very direct cloud implication. Any outside hosting must compliance with locational and judicial requirement. Understand the internal policy changed by the cloud computing. Next is authorization. Cloud computing requires minimal changes to authorization, but see the data security life cycle to understand it better. That we'll see in some time. Next is privacy. Privacy is a sum of regulatory requirement, contractual obligation, and commitment to customer. So you need to understand the total requirement and assure the information system management and security. Contractual control. This is your legal tool for extending governance requirements to a third party like a cloud provider. The next is security controls. A security controls are the tool to implement data governance. They change significantly in cloud computing. Now let's understand what is data security life cycle. So here we are talking about it has 6 phases which talks about create, that is creating the generation of new digital content. But that can be creation, alteration, updation, modification of existing content. Next is storing. Storing is talking about committing the digital data to some sort of storage. It can be stored on a database, that can be on a server which locates in your region, which locates in a different zone, different country. So how and where the data is stored. Next is use. This is data is viewed, processed, otherwise used in some sort of activity, not including modification. Next is share. The information made accessible to others, such as to the users, to customers, and to partners. Next is archive. So data leaves active use and enter into the long-term storage. Next is destroy. So that it talks about the permanent destroying the data using physical or digital mean. So the next is we are talking about the location and entitlement. Location, this can be illustrated by thinking of a life cycle not as a single linear operation but as a series of smaller life cycle running in different operating environment. At nearly any phase, data can be moved out, move into, out of, or between this environment. Due to all potential regulation, contract, and other judicial issue, it is extremely important to understand both the logical and physical location of a data. Like we are having some compliance which says our employees' data should not cross the boundaries of our country. So to cross the to keep the data in another region is not an option. Or if you are keeping it, that needs to be make sure whatever the data protection rules are applicable to the citizens of that country should be applied. Next and last is a function, action, and actor. So function, there are three things we can do. It is read, basically view and read the data, including creating, copying, file transfer, and other exchange of information. Process, perform a transaction on a data. Store, hold the data. The uh, the next is controls. A control restrict a list of possible actions down to allow action. The table below shows one way the list of possibilities which the users then map to controls. So this is how we looked into the information governance part, where we need to look into the compliance of data. uh, it's more difficult if we are having the multi-tenancy, as we in the cloud we are having the shared security responsibility. It's very important to understand who is data owner and who is data custodian. Then how we are basically looking into the complete life cycle of the data, that suggests from the creation of data, storing of data, use of data, how we can share the data, how we can archive the data, and how we can destroy the data. And our information should be classified, and the information management policy should be defined as per the classification. It should be it should be very when policy written, like which data should, how it should be used, where it should be stored, and what are the security measures are required for that. Then we should be taking care of the privacy part and authorization, which is talking about how the data is accessible, to whom the data is accessible. So these are the few points which we need to look into from a information governance. It's just the difference is that if we are looking at a crowd, there are certain more parameters, because we are having the less visibility, where data is storing, how it is getting, okay, where it is getting processed, what are the different security measures has been implemented. From that perspective, we should be giving more emphasis on information governance. So thank you for joining the session.